It's only one little sentence out of your whole big paper, but if you don't get your thesis statement right, your whole paper will fall apart. So what is a thesis statement anyway? Quite simply, it's your point. An essay is an academic proof, and your thesis is the statement of what it is that you will prove. Your thesis statement must take a position. Don't just describe the evidence. And don't waffle around with generalities. Be specific. Make sure that your position is not too obvious. Here's how you go about formulating a thesis statement. Make sure you understand the assignment. For example, in this course, for the common assessment, you can only use texts that appear in the common reader. Get on top of your questions before you start. How long should the paper be? When is it due? What topics are allowable? And how many pieces of evidence are required? Now choose a topic that interests you. You don't want to spend all that time writing about something that bores you. Shocking as it may seem, you have to gather evidence on your topic before you can decide exactly what it is that you will prove. As you gather the data, organize it so that you will be able to see patterns. Looking at the body of data, what patterns do you see? What conclusion can you draw about this? Make sure that you have enough evidence to prove your point, usually 3 to 4 examples. But be careful not to choose a thesis that is so broad that you're swimming in data. Once you've formulated your thesis, it's time to test it. Mentally insert the phrase, "I'm going to prove that," in front of your thesis statement. If it doesn't work, you do not have a real thesis statement. Here's an example. If I say that my thesis statement is St. Augustine's path to Christianity, I'm going to prove that St. Augustine's path to Christianity does not work. The second test is the so what test. For example, if I say that St. Thomas Aquinas was a great philosopher, so what? Everybody knows that. Now let's look at a specific example from this course. For CIT 201, one of the 4 fundamental claims you can choose to write about is this one: God's presence is mediated through nature and reality. But before I get started, I had better make sure I know what that means. Mediated? There's no arbitrator here. By looking up the term, I also learned that mediate can refer to action by a third party. In this case, nature and/or reality is revealing God to us. Okay, now I'm ready to start combing through the textbook for data that I can use in my paper. Plato's allegory of the cave certainly has elements of nature, but it is an allegory, which means everything is symbolic, so maybe I'd better stay away from this one. How about that creation story in Genesis? Can I make an argument that God's presence is made known through his works? What about the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden? Is that an example of God making himself known through their new reality outside of Eden? Turning to Exodus, how about that great sound and light show on the big mountain? Is that an example of God making his presence known through nature? And what about the 10 Commandments? Isn't that an example of God in our everyday reality? The Gospel according to Matthew seems to have a lot of good data I might be able to use. One of them is the story of Jesus' baptism. There's a lot of nature involved in that story. And then there's the Transfiguration. Maybe I can make the argument that the light is an element of nature. As I look through the Gospel according to Matthew, I see lots and lots of miracles. Maybe I can make the case that this is God, as in Jesus, intervening through reality. And then there's Jesus walking on the water. I think I can argue that that is both an instance of nature and reality revealing God's presence. The resurrection might be a good example. There are elements of nature, such as the bright light and the earthquake, and also elements of reality, such as the empty tomb and the risen Jesus himself. The story of St. Augustine doesn't seem to have much nature in it, but I think I can make an argument that God intervened through reality to call Augustine. For example, I can argue that he was really moved when he heard Ambrose speak. And of course, the famous beggar incident was quite a wake-up call for Augustine. And then there was that critical moment. when he heard the child outside singing, "Take and read," which caused him to pick up Paul's letters and find the passage that led to his conversion. In Dante's Inferno, the punishments certainly seem to be God intervening through reality, but it's not in this life, so I'll have to think about whether I want to use this or not. In Dante's Paradiso, even though he's in the other world, he sees God as a book of love and sees that the pages representing God's love are scattered throughout nature in this world. Wow, that's a lot of data. I think I'm a little overwhelmed. Let me see if I can find a common thread in all of this. Well, a lot of these stories involve light. Maybe I can build my thesis around the image of light as a manifestation of God. Or maybe I can make the argument that God's presence is a sort of call, such as the call to obedience that we find in Exodus and Genesis. Or I can say that it is the call to salvation, or perhaps a call to conversion as it was with Augustine. I have some great ideas. I think I'm ready to formulate my thesis statement. And now, it's your turn.